In this episode, we talk about animal research in the light of the newly published animal use numbers of the Federal Ministry for Agriculture and Nutrition in Germany and the response online. After that, Bart presents his favorite statistics paper of 2018, which may help publish results that had previously deemed unpublishable. You may or may not have been hoping for the reveal of our attempt to write summaries of our joint paper, Gaze Strategy of the Freely Flying Zebrafinch. Sadly, we are still not ready. I guess I am winning my point that it's just too much work for a full-time working researcher like my co-host, Bart Gerten. My name is Dennis Eckmeyer, and you're listening to episode 18 of the Science for Societal Progress podcast. Happy New Year, Bart!
Happy New Year, Dennis. What did you do for New Year's?
Nothing. I was sick at home.
Great!
Yeah, isn't that awesome?
You know how to party.
Yeah. Well, the two of us met in Cologne in Christmas.
Really? I was high all the time.
You were high all the time? Okay.
I can't remember.
Because you visited your relatives in the Netherlands.
No, yeah. Dennis and I met in Cologne.
Yeah, and I was already a little bit sick, and then it got worse, and so I was. New Year's Eve was the worst. I was really not well, so I slept for like 10 hours, and now I'm back. So, what is your prospect for 2019? Any plans?
I'm going to be the first male speaker on the VOCANet, the Women Career Network that invited me to speak at their yearly workshop in March.
How come?
I spent 2 years with my sons at home.
I do not remember you not being at the university during that time.
You will have met me sometimes at the university, but there was a huge gap. Or what surprised me was they asked me if I would be part of a panel discussion. And I thought, well, yeah, of course. I like to hear myself talk. Why not?
That's why you're here.
Yeah. And then I found out that Christina Nusslein-Vollhardt actually is on the same panel.
Oh, nice. For those who don't know, Christiane Nusslein-Vollhardt is a Nobel Prize winning Drosophila geneticist.
I'm really nervous, man.
Yeah, I can imagine. I heard mixed things about her personality. So in the past, I heard her say things that were actually not really feminist, let's say, and sounded a little bit harsh to me. But then later I heard different statements that were not as harsh. Maybe she just matured.
I'm aware that one of my students was quite cross with her for saying something about the mirror and makeup.
Like women should not spend so much time in front of the mirror.
All right. Yeah. I think it's very hard to find out. So I can ask her about that comment. I guess she has to face the music, or will have to face the music a few times in the meantime. But I think it's quite hard to figure out in which kind of context this remark was made. I actually never read the text. I'm still pretty awestruck by the scientific merits that Nusslein-Vollhardt has, so I'm still a fan.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is the one thing I'm looking most forward to.
Awesome.
And this is also the thing I'm most scared of, because I usually don't get nervous in front of talks or presentations or stuff like that. But I usually know the stuff that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And this is super new to me.
Yeah, I guess it's also very personal, right?
Yeah, but maybe it's going to be fun. I don't know.
Crossing fingers.
Yeah, if I have to find a new job afterwards, I can be part of your giant scientific outreach emporium.
Yeah.
We both live from the Patreon income then.
Yeah, we can split the $46.
That's nice, thanks. See, this is real friendship.
Yeah. Talking about that, yeah, my account is getting lower. So the time at which I have to decide what to do next and maybe find a job is coming closer. It's a bit odd because I like it right now. I mean, I still work all day long. Um, I'm just not getting paid for it. That's the problem.
But how did the researcher for hire thing work out for you? Could you attract people to write or read or research for?
No. So I had two
Hmm.
people who told me they would maybe send me something to edit, and none of them did. Um, I haven't been advertising a lot. Maybe that was a mistake. I hope to change that. I am going to start a YouTube channel to have something to present. What I want to do there is share my experience as an academic because I'm not going to have that pleasure as a professor. And since I've been at private research institutes, I also didn't teach any classes or anything yet. So maybe I can share my experience this way. I hope that'll be fun. And I hope I'll be able to continue with that for a longer time, depending on whether or not I get some gigs. I did apply for sponsorship for a second podcast. The first answer was positive, but then I had to write a full proposal and write down specifically how much money I need. So now I'm waiting for the response. And it depends on how many episodes they would sponsor, whether that would be sufficient for me to extend my sabbatical or not. So in December, the Federal Ministry for Agriculture and Nutrition in Germany, or in German Bundesministerium für Landwirtschaft und Ernährung, published numbers on how many animals were used for animal experimentation in Germany. And so in total, it was more than 2 million animals that were used. And most of those were mice, 1.37 million mice. Then there's 255,000 rats, 240,000 fish, 3,300 dogs, 718 cats, and 3,472 monkeys. And 50% of that goes into fundamental research, which is what we talk about here mostly. 27% goes into drug production and drug testing. 15% for direct disease research, which means that they looked at sick animals and looked at the progression of the disease and its effect on the animal.
Dennis and I are quite often involved in discussions about animal usage. Why is this so important for us as researchers? I think very often we are misunderstood in the way that we promote animal research for the sake of animal research. And a very important part here is that if any of us could do the same science without animals or without hurting or using animals, that would make things easier and often better for us, as taking data from animals is notoriously hard, and it involves quite a lot of care and caretaking. And for example, one of the rules of thumb that we often teach our students is that a monkey in, for example, the German Primate Center costs more money a month just to keep him around than the salary of a PhD student. So these monkeys are very, very well taken care of, and nobody would hurt them or endanger them in any way because it's so expensive to keep them, even if they wouldn't care for the animal itself, which all of these people do. They are very committed to their animals and they train them. And from my personal knowledge, I would say they would never do anything that harms the animal without a scientific reason.
I think the reason why a lot of scientists talk about research in general, and including animal research as just doing science for the sake of it, is because in fundamental research, it is really hard to know in advance what the results will end up being good for. And that's the basic nature of science. We are looking at things that are unknown, and hence we cannot know what they will be good for. So scientists are inclined to think that it would be actually beneficial to say, look, science has gotten us great benefits, and in a lot of cases, the research question was not in any way related directly to its later application. Nevertheless, it's always better to know things than to not know things. And overall, the benefit of simply doing fundamental research, quote unquote, for its own sake, in the end lead to applications and progress in the future. And this future can be decades away. So it's really hard to know in advance how these things will work out. And not all of these findings will necessarily be only good for medical research. If we look at the advances in artificial intelligence, for example, right now. So the hype right now is so-called deep learning. It's the most advanced artificial intelligence that we have. And deep learning itself is based on neural networks, artificial neural networks. But the idea for neural networks comes out of neuroscience, where they were studying the brain and figuring out that neurons exist and that they communicate with each other, and they take a signal, transform it in a way, and then transmit it to the next layer in the neural networks. So these are all aspects where we don't know in advance what they will be good for. The most obvious application for physiological studies in animals would be medical. And that doesn't include only human medicine, but also veterinary medicine.
That's true. And if you look at the numbers directly that are involved in animal usage, you see that most of these animals come either from mice, rats, or small fish, which make up about 1.8 million of the over 2 million used animals. Which means that usually scientists, at least in our field, are very concerned to ask the right question to the right kind of animal. So if I can solve the same, or if I can analyze the same hypothesis in either a higher developed or lower developed animal, I will always go for the lower developed animal. In this case, you rather would want to use a mouse than a monkey for the same research question.
Yeah, well, I struggle as a biologist. I struggle with the idea of one being higher developed. I don't know what this is supposed to mean. I mean, they all have the same duration of evolutionary history behind them. What do you mean with higher developed in this case?
So seemingly the law and our ethics dictate that some animals are more equal than other animals. And seemingly, so that's how I always read these statements, is using a monkey for an experiment much worse than using a mouse. Or would you disagree on that?
No, that's how it's seen. We rank animals according to either are they similar to us or are they pets. So we have higher regard for monkeys because they're more similar to us. We have higher regards for cats and dogs because we keep them as pets. Whereas a pig is almost exclusively used for food production, and we have less regards for those.
I think that's a very weird way to look at animals. But that might be because the generation before my parents were farmers, and animals are to me animals. That means very often I can't understand what people actually emphasize with animals. So, for example, as a kid, we had dogs, Great Danes, and I loved my dogs a lot. And if any of them would have gotten sick, I would have brought them to the vet, but I would never sustain them with like a time consuming and money consuming treatment. Like, for example, they would develop diabetes. I wouldn't give them insulin. I'm sorry, if the dog gets diabetes, from my point of view, as treating them ethically, I wouldn't be able to hand them out insulin all the time. I think that people who buy for the fun of having a dog insulin are kind of unethical. It's a dog. I mean, you love it a lot. I understand that, but it's not another human being. And to come back to the original question, I think this is a weird kind of discussion because animals are animals. They are not humans. They are not human-like. I think we should treat them ethically, but so after that level, it becomes kind of weird. People get very attached to their dogs and they actually react very poorly to the situation that a dog can also be used to be just another animal.
Right.
I think one of the best modern ways I've seen criticizing our treatment of animals is in South Park.
South Park?
There's a very long episode about whaling. And as always in South Park, it rips a lot about like the Japanese and whaling, etc., and they are the bad guys. And at the end, the kids can convince the Japanese to then, instead of going whaling and killing dolphins, they kill cows and sheep. And everybody's all right with that. And that's basically the whole hybris of this discussion. We are happy to criticize persons or people who kill animals that we find joyful, like dogs, cats, dolphins, whales. But on the other hand, we are quite fine with killing pigs and cows to eat them. In a way, this is like the hybris that I always see in radical animal rights people. They are happy to take on the scientific progress, but they are happy to also criticize the people who gave all that medical advances to them. When I say I see animals as animals, I still see them as emotional animals. I want animals to be fine. I wouldn't treat them poorly. For that reason, I'm always happy if we can reduce the number of experiments to be done, if I can reduce the number of animals used in research. And all research in Germany and the European Union, I think basically worldwide, has to follow these 3R ideals, which are reduce, refine, replace, which I think you discussed also in the December episode of your podcast. And reducing means reducing the numbers of animals needed. Refining means making the experiments more efficient and more pleasant for the animal. And replacing means to actually replace each possible experiment that has animals against a simulation or an experiment that doesn't involve animals anymore. I think what would be really helpful is to make the societal preferred option, using less animals or producing less animals, the easier to take option, not by prohibiting the things that we don't want to happen, but to facilitate the things that we want to happen.
So how would that look like? I mean, there's already the thing that you always use the method that's best. And if it's a non-animal method, then either you don't do it because you don't have the know-how to do it. So you maybe look for a collaboration. Somebody else does it for you, does the non-animal part of the research. I mean, isn't that the most important part, that we ask our questions and we find the best way to answer it?
I think that so if I really go through that, I think there's not much room for improvement in animal usage because people always try to improve that situation. I don't know a single biologist who does an unnecessary animal experiment. I'm sorry. I can't name one. For example, what we currently are publishing a paper about a certain statistical correction that helps to reduce the number of insects needed in temperature gradient experiments from 780 experiments down to 10. And again, I'm not asking for applause for that, but I'm just saying if now on top of that, there would be funding by the state who says, thanks a lot, that reduces the number of animals needed. Here's whatever grant or here's money to present that method on the next conference, that would be beneficial. That would help other people to actually publish more methods papers on that. To think about the way how to reduce it in a methodological way.
If you are interested in learning more about this topic, you can go back to our December episode 15, where I talked about the 3 Rs and the regulations with Dr. Nuno Enrique Franco. You can also check out our show notes for a summary of this conversation. You will also find a link to the paper we are going to talk about next, but sadly it's paywalled. And while you are on the website, maybe you want to sign up to our new newsletter. I plan to, every month, give you a brief update on what's happened in the month before and what's going to happen in the next month. And now back to our conversation. Talking about papers and methods that would help make scientific findings more efficient in terms of animal use. You shared a paper with me that in a way would actually do that too, right? Because it makes more experiments useful and informative. How did that work?
That's true. This is one of my favorite statistic papers of this year. It's called a new
this
statistical...
year? The year is 2 weeks old. Wow.
No, it's 2018. And it's pretty early in 2018.
So it was the best paper of 2018 in your regard.
No, I wouldn't say it's the best paper of 2018. It's my most favorite statistics paper of 2018.
Okay, fair enough.
It's called A New Statistical Method to Test Equivalence in Application in Male and Female Eastern Bluebird Song by Rose, Matthew, Coslor, and Omland. It was published in Animal Behavior, which is an LV paper. What we can say is, if you're not subscribed anymore to LV, you can always write the authors and ask them for a copy of the paper, and they are allowed to send you one.
That's true. So if you want free copies, do not go to scihub.se and do not download it there.
But write the authors. All scientists are always allowed to send you their own publications. Anyhow, the thing that is actually most interesting in that, for me, if you're interested in a bluebird song, there's also very interesting data about bluebirds and how they sing in there, is that you can finally test for equivalency. As you as a listener might know, many of the statistical tests and hypotheses in science are focused on differences between two data sets. That was the only thing that we had so far, a possibility to statistically test if there is difference. But we had no direct test for equivalency. So, but if you have a grayscale picture, we only had tests for if something is black. Now, if the test wouldn't be successful, we couldn't say if it is white or gray or anything in between those two colors. Now we also have a test for if something is white, and we can say we can test for white and we can test for black and subtract that from all the other cases. Or we can differentiated from all the other gray cases. So now we have a test for equivalency, and what we now can do is, beyond statistical doubt, say that two groups are equivalent. Why is this so important for science? So there was a very interesting Twitter post by Chrissy Jane, who's a Marie Curie fellow at Lund University. And she tried to publish a manuscript that had a negative result. And basically the reviewers said, oh, it's a brilliant idea and it's very well done, but there is no significance to the results. So see you later, publishes somewhere else.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, but here's the benefit of this new test. If you can reach significance in the identity of both data sets, we can maybe overcome that weird bias in publishing policy that we can only publish positive differences. But now we can also publish statistically safe equivalency.
Right.
And that opens up a whole new field of experiments. What is interesting, for example, about this Bluebird song that they tested on is that in the history of publication, only male, or most often male birds are analyzed for singing.
Right, because they're considered to be the ones who sing most.
Exactly. And so that I'm out here on a limb, and if you're a bird expert, please excuse my mediocre knowledge on birds. But seemingly, so to my naive knowledge about birdsong, I always thought the males sing, the females listen. They will be able to make sounds, but who cares?
So actually, Bart, I don't think I'm a bird expert anymore. Especially,
but you fancy birds, do you?
I do fancy birds. And there are actually several species that make duets. So they sing back and forth. So both sing.
Exactly. But in this case, the authors could actually show that in the Eastern Bluebird, the 5 major parameters of singing that are most often quantified are not significantly different between males and females. And this is where usually the analysis stops. Because if you can't show significant difference, it's not interesting. But they could show that they are not only not significantly different, they are significantly equivalent. So the female is as able to sing the song as the male, she does only less often.
Huh.
And this gives the story a whole new twist. Before that, you could actually take this comparison and put it to all the other comparisons that you did in your life and place it on the unpublishable data pile.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can go through the motions of publishing that and publish it somewhere where nobody is going to read it. Or you can take it and now do this test and actually publish it in Animal Behavior. And talk about like the interesting part that females
Animal
and
Behavior
males
is a journal.
Oh, sorry. In the Animal Behavior Journal of the much beloved.
Yeah, you don't have to mention all the time. I'm going to delete all mentions of from this podcast.
Oh, I thought we could trash them a bit.
Oh, I will leave everything in, including this comment of me. There will just be a beep when I say.
So back from the coolest money grabber in the business to the science. So you can actually now publish this and show that they are significantly equal. And that is in of itself interesting, because that means that all the neuronal structure must be there to create the exact same song, which will actually be quite energy intensive, but the female just doesn't sing that often. And that's a very interesting scientific conclusion. I don't know how this is in the case of Christy Jean's manuscript or research project, but maybe this helps in future to actually create an easier case for editors and reviewers to see that you don't need always to have positive, significant differences to have an interesting scientific finding.
Right. Yeah, I mean, most scientists actually already agree on that, that if there's no significant difference, we want to know, even if it's just to know that it's not worth testing that hypothesis again, right? So let's say you have a larger field, and the field is at a specific point along the research, and then a lot of people will have the same idea, and they will want to test that idea. And if one of them tests the idea and finds out, oh, there's no statistical difference here, if they cannot publish that, that means that everybody else who has the same idea will still try and repeat the experiment unbeknownst to anybody, and only to find that there is no statistical difference, and then also not being able to publish it. So this is why scientists are actually quite interested in these negative ideas, and I find it extremely odd that reviewers would say, oh, there is no statistical significance here, therefore it should not be published. In the next episode, I talk with Maria Pinto, a graduate student in marine biology and science communicator on YouTube, about the insecurities and uncertainties early career researchers are facing. For the summary and further readings, find the show notes to this episode on www.scienceforprogress.eu. If you have questions, critique, or suggestions, get in contact by email info@scienceforprogress.eu or on social media @Sci4Progress for Twitter and Facebook. Science for Progress is free and accessible. However, in order to keep going and continue to improve and grow, we need your help. You can find information on how to support us on our website www.scienceforprogress.eu. Follow the menu Supporters to Your Support. The best way to support us is through Patreon. We are halfway to financing our monthly expenses, and it would be an enormous relief to have that covered. Check out the perks on www.patreon.com/sci4progress. My sincerest thanks to those who are already supporting us. Have a good day. Bye-bye.